Where's Isaac? I lost Isaac already. Isaac, come on down. I want to start. I want to start by thanking the Casson family for having Exceed's program here today. Very, very warm, Jackie. Thank you very much. God bless you. And Joyce, you did a beautiful thing for opening up your beach club. It's not your house, it's your beach club, right? It's very nice. Okay, so I bought one though. I was there last week. So Isaac approached us about 2 months ago and said he wanted to have an event that brought young people together and helped them get in touch with what's happening in the tech industry, from being involved in that, as well as the venture capitalists that can help and support and raise money and do things like that. So when he came to us, it was right out of the gate. It was something we wanted to do because at Exceed, we feel it's most important to address the young people in our community. So I'm very excited about today. I think it's going to be great. There's going to be a lot we're going to cover. So I'm going to turn it over to Isaac. But before I do that, I want to also thank Israel Discount Bank, Lisa Baum, and her whole entire team. Let's give them a hand. That's where the money is, folks. If you need to borrow money, go right there. She's great. She's been a great supporter of Exceed from the beginning. From the beginning. Anytime I called on her, she was great, supportive, and the Israel Discount Bank is sponsoring today's event. So let's give them another round. Right. IDB is here for our community. Oh. Let's give it up for Lisa.
I, I actually had a few things to say about you, too. Okay. Hang on. Okay. Yeah. We have to come prepared. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, your friends at IDB are proud to be a sponsor of Exceed's Tech event today, hosted by our valued customer, Jack Albert. A hand for him and his beautiful wife, Joyce, on their absolutely fabulous beach on a beautiful day. We couldn't ask for better weather. We embrace Exceed for its role in the community, helping companies achieve business success. And as Mark pointed out, our involvement with Exceed has been strong from its earliest days, as we believe our guiding philosophies are very much aligned. Now a few words about Mark. That's why he turned the microphone over to me. Mark leads by example, and his devotion to Exceed is a precious gift, particularly to those who benefit from his counseling. His commitment of time and passion to help others is truly inspiring, and we've really enjoyed partnering up with him on a number of events, including this one, which is obviously our favorite. We're living in a very fast-paced world. Things are changing, businesses are changing, and technology is becoming an industry in and of itself. At IDB, we've embraced that. We've actually set up a technology group, and we are interested, as you're going into business, to come bank with us. And I will just point out that it's a holistic approach, that we have a partnership with our investment bank in Israel, and some of you may be familiar because those of you may have heard about the bond market in Israel for real estate loans, where some of the movers and shakers in the community have taken, loans from Israel at very advantageous rates. I'm going to point out that our people in Israel are interested in doing the same type of financing in tech. So don't just think about us for the checking account, for the loan, the factoring. Think about us for raising money and raising debt, because we're very interested in that. And we hope that you will give us a call. There are a number of people that are here from the bank today. I want them just to raise their hand. Yuri Piltzer, Richard Miller, George Commander, Barry Solomon, Alan Mahoney, Matt Salmon. Some of you may not be here, and if you're not here, you're going to have to explain it to me tomorrow. Maddie Reyes, who worked with me on the event, should be here shortly, and and Teresa Murphy from our marketing department. Thanks for putting it together. Okay, so it's time for me to hand the microphone back so we could start it. I just want to say a few words at the end. Exceed and IDB joined at the hip, supporting technology, our mutual fit.
Very nice. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. So a few announcements, and then we're going to get started. I'm going to turn it over to Isaac. Tomorrow, there's a women's event, Exceed for Women. It's called We. It is going to be at Jennifer and Isaac Sitt's house at the other end of Ocean Avenue, also on the beach. It seems to be a beach time. The event is going to be, the keynote speaker for that event is the CEO of SoulCycle. I don't have her name. Do we know it? Melanie Whaler, CEO of SoulCycle. Very inspirational, great speaker, very successful person. So before I turn it over to Isaac, what I'd really like for all of the brave souls that sit on the beach, go ahead and sit up front because this whole event is going to be moving forward, and I want to bring you all down. So if you would, come on down to the beach, and I'm going to turn it over to Isaac.
It's not working. Oh, 2 seconds. It's okay. That's all good. I got this. Check. Hey, everybody. My name's Isaac Casson. I'm from the exec team, and I want to welcome you all to Exceed Tech 2017. So before we begin, I just want to give a thanks to all the awesome people that helped today happen. First, thank you to the Exceed Network, Mark, Erwin, Rue, Emily, all the awesome people that put this thing together. Thank you. I also want to thank our sponsor, IDB Bank, as well as Ms. Baum. And I want to thank my parents for letting us use this beautiful venue on this beautiful day. So thank you for that. Let's give them a round of applause. So as Mark mentioned briefly, when we were first putting together this event, we had a very clear objective. On the one hand, we wanted to provide insight into technology, into entrepreneurship, right? The processes that go into it, coming up with an idea, turning it into a product, marketing, funding it, scaling it eventually into a much larger vision. But the main objective was to reveal to the crowd the truth that success in tech, success in entrepreneurship, and honestly, success in any really part of life is just the process. It's all about processes. Now, it's not easy. These processes require execution. You need the right team. You need the right people behind it. Obviously, there's certain things out of your control, like time and place. But the reality is each one of us could tap into that process. And the reason why I think it's so important for us to know that is because for many of us, technology and entrepreneurship in general has really become very romanticized, right? We've read books about it. We've watched movies. We've heard stories about the risk takers, the college dropouts, the genius entrepreneurs that came up with tech. And to be honest with you, it's really not like that. Technology itself is just a small piece to the grander puzzle. You don't have to be an engineer or a coder to enter tech. Technology is the means to which you get there. So for example, if you have a vision, right, of some type of value you want to bring or some type of pain point you want to solve, the reason why technology has a role is because generally the resources at your disposal during the status quo aren't enough to bring that value, to bring that vision. So you have to transcend the status quo. You have to go above the current conditions. And the only way you do that is through new technologies and new advancements. However, you need someone to come up with the technology, come up with the idea. You need someone to find funding for it. You need to market it. There's a lot of different steps to turning technology into something that we can practically use. And that's where you guys come in, right? Not all of us know how to type code. Not all of us. For those of you who don't know about exec, my partners and I were 19 when we started the company about 2 years ago. None of us knew anything about technology. And when I say nothing, I meant literally nothing. We had a vision, right? We knew that young people were being neglected when it came to their money. We knew that banks weren't giving us the proper services, and the services they did offer were very expensive. We knew that the current apps out there weren't experiential to our culture or personalized enough. But most importantly, we knew that we were going to be the ones to change that. So even though we didn't know about tech, we had a vision, we knew what we wanted to get done, and slowly but surely you learn, you iterate, you better yourself, and you surround yourself with people that can execute on your vision, right? So we brought on a new CEO, Derek Brown, who you'll hear from. He worked at LinkedIn, he worked at Adipar, he scaled out a 7-person engineering team. So the point is, be a good human being, do what you love, solve an issue, and the rest will come. I don't like the idea that technology has become so removed from the everyday person. And I know a lot of you guys in the crowd, and for those of you that I don't, I know of you, and I know we all have great ideas. It could be a hip-hop album idea, right? It can be you want to start a nonprofit. It could be you want to go into wholesale. The reality is we all have these ideas and all these concepts, and it's time to execute on them, right? We live in a time where young people have access to more networks than the world's biggest companies did a decade ago, 2 decades ago, right? With social media, with all the outreach we have. So all your job is to build value as best as you can, share the value, and let the market decide whether or not you should scale. The market always decides. So if you think that you have an idea or if you have a product, take it to market. So I don't want to belabor the point. I'm going to introduce the first panel. The first panel is going to be about marketing, the processes that go into marketing, both on a front-end side, right? As a young person, how can I market my stuff? And as a back-end, right? How does the industry work? What do people look for when it comes to high-quality marketing? And we have 3 different marketing verticals that are going to be presented in the panel. We have public relations, which is basically just the public view of the company through credible thought leaders, right? Like journalists, bloggers, stuff like that. We're going to have a data-oriented form of marketing, right, where you have digital ads and you use data sort of to find your target market and market with precision. And then we have a growth hacking mentality, right? How can we use as little resources as possible to scale? So with that, I'd like to welcome Sam, our creative director at Exec. She's going to be moderating the panel. And then I'll have the panelists themselves introduce themselves. So everyone, please come to the stage.
Tomer.
Okay, awesome. I'd love to get started by having everyone just go through like 1 or 2 sentences about your work background, and then just to get everyone oriented as well, talk about what got you interested in marketing.
Yes, hello. Thank you all for having me. I'm excited for the panel. My name is Frank Chaparro. I'm a financial journalist at Business Insider, covering mostly cryptocurrency type stuff, but also, you know, any sort of development that's happening within the world of finance and as it relates to technology. Prior to that, though, however, I was at the NASDAQ stock market doing public relations and corporate communications, and so basically my experience marries both sides of the marketing and, you know, journalism industry, if you will. Thanks. Oh, you have yours.
Got my own, yeah.
Very nice.
My name's Nick Greenfield. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Candid Company, which is a new direct-to-consumer clear aligners brand. Before that, I've been a few different places. The last was a company called Paribus, which sold to Capital One in October, and was on the early pre-launch team at Lyft, and helped build that company up from kind of 0 to national expansion. So got my start in marketing actually at Lyft, and before Lyft there was a company called Zimride, and there was no one to do any consumer marketing, and it was my job to figure out how to basically launch a bus line between Berkeley and UCLA. And so put on a frog and beaver suit every other day for a couple weeks and went out and visited a bunch of college dorms. So very similar to what these guys are doing here now.
First of all, thank you everybody for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Tomer Lax. I'm the global VP for a company by the name of SimilarWeb. We're a market intelligence and competitive intelligence SaaS platform, essentially aggregating different types of consumer behaviors and usages on every application and every website in the world. To date, we've raised about $112 million in various rounds based out of Tel Aviv. I actually came into the tech world from a completely different angle. Most of my career I spent in management consulting. I used to be head of strategic consulting for KPMG. and made the shift into the Israeli high-tech market, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, is quite dynamic and robust.
And across all verticals, what has been the most successful marketing campaign? Just like in your recent memory.
For like any
Yeah,
company ever?
for anything.
Wow, that's a that's an interesting one. I think, most successful is going to be a challenging answer, but perhaps one thing that I would love to talk about is something that I've found to be a trend, at least in the retail and direct to consumer world, which is kind of Warby Parker. So Warby Parker has figured out how to not just build an online brand, but also marry the retail presence with an online presence, and they launched that all with a bus. So Warby Parker, before they built any of their retail locations, which are I think the highest grossing per square foot retail locations outside of the Apple Store, they did that by driving a bus around the country and listening and hearing consumer insights about what the market was telling them about what their retail experience should look like. And so they launched with the web. You could order glasses on the internet, but then within a couple years, they realized they needed a physical presence. And so they launched this bus. And the bus was a great marketing tool, but also a great listening tool where you could talk to your consumers, learn what they wanted. And from that, they were able to build an incredibly powerful marketing engine on the ground with their retail locations. So I think Warby Parker is perhaps kind of the most impressive, at least in the direct-to-consumer space of modern marketing.
I think another interesting development is sort of making folks do your marketing and advertising for you, like actual consumers. And one prominent example that I think is pretty cool is Coca-Cola. They had the share a Coke with a friend, and then they had the name on it. And so folks, would take to Twitter, Instagram, and all the different social media sites, basically doing the marketing for Coca-Cola itself. And so I think that that's been effective. And with social media, you see tons of examples like that.
Yeah, I think, without getting into specific examples, I think it's more, we're seeing a change in the way that marketing and CMO directors are approaching the entire process. I think the process has changed definitely over the last 20 years where I've been involved. And you see a much deeper understanding by marketeers today about the entire life cycle and being able to map out the customer journey. I think that's one of the biggest, if I'll flip your question around, where the failures come in, is that a lot of these organizations don't take the necessary time to map out their customer journey and to get a full understanding of who their market is, who their audience is, and then reverse engineer and make sure that whatever they're trying to pitch, sell, promote is targeted accordingly. We've seen a big shift in that, obviously, with the digital aspect coming on. And the ability to gather a lot of data in a very short period of time to make very dynamic and quick decisions. So the speed to market has changed quite significantly.
Yeah, and I would follow that up with having seen that world evolve over the last kind of 6 to 10 years. Companies are no longer just thinking about what gets the first sale, but it's what gets the lifetime value.
Yep.
So how do you get a customer in the door who's actually going to be worth something in the future? Because there's plenty of strategies out there to get a customer who's going to come in and buy once, but many times you're not going to return your ad spend on your first purchase. You need to return your ad spend on your 20th purchase. And so how do you both figure out the data and also the right channels to find those people?
Yeah, just to add to that, my responsibility at SimilarWeb is essentially the entire post-sale process. So once we've closed an account, it gets transferred over to my team, and we have several different divisions that manage that relationship. And you're absolutely right. The lifetime value of a client from a churn analysis standpoint is eminently more important today than the new business aspect of it. We always talk about making sure that our retention rates are high, because that valuation for a SaaS business is critical. There's going to be a lot of VC folks here that'll tell you that when they look at SaaS companies, the first question that they're going to be asking is, what's your churn rate? And that's where a lot of this sits in terms of making sure that your processes are strong and valid in terms of bringing that lifetime value to the client.
So what is the process there of kind of creating an alignment between customer acquisition and the retention?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So the data that we use now to make decisions on what marketing channels are successful is no longer just whether we acquired a customer. It's building an entire stack, right? So it's thinking about what are our competitors doing at the top of the funnel with a SimilarWeb or something kind of a comparable tool. It's then saying, okay, once people come to our website or come to our app, how are they getting there? How are they behaving in the first 24 hours or 48 hours, or depending on the product, maybe it's the first, 6 months, and then how do we optimize and find those people in the right places? So, an example here would be I might get a customer from a Facebook ad, and that customer is going to spend $100 on my site over this first 6 months, and it cost me $10 to get that person. Or I might pay $50 to acquire a customer with high intent from a search ad, but that person's going to spend $2,000 in the first 6 months. And so it's figuring out how do you segment down those users in the consumer side, and then on the enterprise side, it's how do you figure out not only how do you segment them, but how do you prevent churn. And so retention and cohort analyses, at least as companies that I've been involved with, as we've been raising money and figuring out how do we build a big business, cohort analysis is the most important part of any business post-sale, and is just becoming kind of one of those dominant parts of marketing as marketing becomes more data-driven.
And what would you say is the single biggest mistake that people make when attempting to market things? Like, it sounds like you're obviously placing a lot of importance on customer retention, especially in today's market, but what are other mistakes that are common?
I think it's lack of processes and lack of methodology. Doesn't matter what stage you're in as a startup, whether you're a 5-person startup or you're a 500-person company. You have to build those processes and methodologies throughout your customer life cycle from day one. And the earlier that you do it, the earlier that you initiate these methods, the easier it's going to be for you to retain those clients along the way. So it's first taking an inward look, understanding how your customers interact. So I'll give you an example with SimilarWeb. We're very much, as you would expect, a data-driven company. So we look at, on a daily basis, how our clients are actually using our platform. And we've gotten to the point where we can actually predict moving forward whether or not a client is likely to churn based on the way that they're using our systems. And then when we see a client that goes off course, then we have specific initiatives, literally a playbook. If X happens, Y should follow. And building those playbooks, I don't see that enough. People try to kind of wing it, and winging it will only take you so far.
From more of a media perspective, I think the biggest mistake that folks do in marketing their new company or a new product rollout is just not getting through the technical gobbledygook of whatever it is they're doing. And that's something that's hard for me, and it's hard for whatever media outlet, the folks who are reading that site. It could be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but if people don't understand what it is, then they're not going to care. And so effectively getting your message out in a way that, folks in the middle of the country or my grandmother or, my 11-year-old cousin can understand is important. And of course, you need to sort of hone in on your audience, but if it's a big consumer-facing product, then, you can't just throw AI and machine learning and whatever have you at them. It needs to make sense.
Yeah, and I would love to follow that up with, I think, something the exec team is doing really well, is they have said, we have a target demographic we're going after and a segment, and we're going to be hyper-focused on getting everyone in that demographic and that segment, and we're going to get them to love our product and use our product and retain, have those retention levels for a consumer product. And then once they figure out, okay, we've got those guys all dialed in and they're really loving and using the product, that's when we can think about expanding and going out and either spending more dollars or really marketing our product to a broader base. Because understanding who your core demographic and segment is, even if you have 10 or 100 or 1,000 customers total across your entire pilot or beta period, you're going to see much, much more interesting data, and you'll be able to use that to then follow up and say, okay, now we're ready to mass market to the consumer. Without having really, really good core customers using your product over and over again, you're never going to be able to gain traction with a broader base.
And sort of jumping off of that, as a result, and paralleling that thought process, you can't just go straight to the Wall Street Journal then, or to a more broad publication. If you are hyper-focused on that one segment, then focus on a media outlet that pertains to that segment and serves that segment.
Maybe just tying both these points together, it's making sure that you're communicating the value that you're going to be bringing to your clients very, very clearly and very succinctly. Like you said, that your 5-year-old nephew can understand it, and wrapping that up. And I always ask either our customer success managers or our strategic consultants when they first join our company, I always ask them what the 5 W's are. And everybody answers the same thing, right? Who, what, where. And actually that's wrong. At the end of the day, you have to ask why 5 times until you actually get to the core of why your client is willing to spend money to use your product or your service. And when you can drill down to that, then you can reverse engineer it and be able to create a message that conveys where that actionable insight and that value that you're going to bring to your clients.
Before we open it up to the audience for questions, I'd love to just close on asking about how there's been a lot of research about how millennials especially don't like being marketed to, kind of in the conventional sense. What advice would you give for marketing to people who don't like to be marketed to, kind of in the traditional sense?
I think there are kind of 2 really good lessons here, and something that we took away at Paribus is that is exactly true. Is when you're going after the kind of millennial demographic, they don't want to be marketed to, they want to be part of the experience. And so it's how do you create either an experience or a story that really resonates, and it's not necessarily about, hey, here's our big billboard, this is what we're doing. It's how do I personally, and how does my network and how does my community get involved with what's going on here? So an example of that is figuring out how do you let your customers do your storytelling for you and promote that. Airbnb is a great example of a company that's done that incredibly well, where they understand that it's not marketing, hey, you can rent somebody's house and this is incredible and this is why. It's showing beautiful photos, it's telling stories, it's sharing experiences from their community, and that community then markets out to the world and says how great their product is. And I think you can see that reflected by, 1, their massive growth, and 2, in things like Net Promoter Score, where their customers are the ones doing their marketing for them and telling everybody about their product.
This is kind of a less technical answer and more from my perspective as a journalist. But a lot of the times, it's the same thing. Like, I don't want to be marketed at when I'm writing about something, and so I think there's a parallel there. Most of the time, it has to do with the people. And so I get a lot of pitches from folks telling me that they have this great new product and great new company, and hundreds a day. And to sift through the wheat and the chaff, a lot of the time it boils down to the people. And so specifically with Exec, the main reason why I wrote the story wasn't because of the app necessarily, but more because you have this guy coming on, this veteran in technology who was at LinkedIn, coming on to a company founded by a group of young university students. That's interesting. People are interesting. Products aren't always that interesting.
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand with making sure that you set up voice of customer programs. I don't think it's just millennials, to be honest with you, that don't like to be marketed to. I don't think any of us truly like to be marketed to. But once you actually sit down and you speak with your target audience and you start understanding what it is that's driving them, and it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about the 5 whys. When you understand what is the value that the client is trying to get out of your product or service, then you know how to position yourself correctly. And my suggestion is use a lot of data. Follow the data. It'll tell you exactly where the focus is. If you're trying to ram something down the market's throat, typically it has a very, very nasty gag reaction. It doesn't work. So you have to partner with your client base. You have to understand where it is that they're going to be most open to listening to the value that you can bring.
What's up? This mic dropped. Maybe it's off. Man, I know that it's hotter out here than a DJ Khaled video, but we are putting up, right? Everyone's got sunglasses on. We're on the beach. It's a beautiful Sunday morning, and we're talking about venture capital. It doesn't have to be as boring as you think it does. So let's go ahead and jump right into it with you guys. I'd love an intro, who you are, where you work, and then if you were a genre of music, what genre of music would you be? This is something we love to do at Exec, and we're going to extend that gracious offer to you guys.
Is this mic working? Yeah. Hey, everybody. Michael Sidgmore. Thanks for having me, Derek, and the exec team. Appreciate it. I'm a partner at Broadhaven Ventures. We've built an early stage, basically pre-Series A fintech-focused venture fund out of a fintech investment bank called Broadhaven Capital Partners. We invest solely in fintech companies. And we look really early stage and try to help them partner with many with the institutions so that they can so institutions can actually figure out a way to understand fintech space and see the kind of coming disruption that's happening. Before that, I was been in the fintech world on the startup side. I was a pre-product, pre-launch employee at iCapital Network, where I built the sales team with 2 other guys. We built a platform to democratize access to private equity funds. Built the platform to over $2 billion in 2.5 years, an investment from BlackRock recently. And then before that, I was at another fintech company called Mosaic, a crowdfunding platform that crowdfunded capital for solar finance projects. I was the first sales hire there. And then before that, I was at Goldman Sachs on a fintech investing team. Music. Oh, music. Wow, that's a good question. I'd have to say electronic. I like a fast beat. Early stage gives me a fast pace. You meet a lot of entrepreneurs, you get to know them, and you have to make decisions pretty quickly.
And you're in California now, so that's perfect.
Yes.
You left the East Coast.
I did. I'm back pretty often, but yeah, I'm in the Valley. I think it's good to understand what's going on the West Coast in fintech. I think traditionally they've been more direct-to-consumer focused, more innovative in some senses, and then New York has been mainly because of its kind of the propensity of banks there. It's been more B2B and institutional, so it's good to have both perspectives.
But aren't you guys lazier on the West Coast? No, I'm kidding. Time.
So my name is Chaim Daba. I am a partner in HDS Capital, which is an early stage and not so early stage investment. It's a family venture office. Some of our investment also include early Uber, early Snapchat, FanDuel, etc. But a lot of startup as well. So my background is I've been in the apparel wholesale business for all my life, about 35 years. In 2007, decided to leave and sold my company to a big Hong Kong conglomerate, a $22 billion company called Li & Fung. I stayed to run the company till the U.S. apparel piece of the company for till 2014, and in the meantime, I started HDS Capital in 2012. Today, not only I'm investing, I also have our very own startup, company called Kidbox. Started about a year and a half ago, very fast growth. We have, it's a technology, it's basically predictive personalized shopping, similar to Stitch Fix, but for kids. It has an amazing data technology team based in Tel Aviv. Bunch of engineers there. It so happened that I give a shout out to Gal Brill, who heads our Tel Aviv team, who happened to be visiting my house. Amazing guy. Really amazing technology team. The amazing thing about Tel Aviv was that I hired Gal in December of 2015. Sorry, in September of 2015. By the end of October, we had 8 engineers in place. And by March, we had an alpha, and by May, we had a beta. And it's all super technology driven. And so we believe in predictive technology, and right now I'm spending my time half between leading Kidbox, although I've hired an amazing CEO, and half between investing in startups.
Fantastic.
Music, think Eric Clapton.
Eric, oh, nice. Love some cream. All right, Michael.
Cool. My name is Mike Cardamone. So I wear 2 hats, kind of. So I started and run a SaaS-focused accelerator called Acceleprise, which is actually based out in San Francisco. So we invest in about 20 to 25 companies a year, very early stage. We give them office space in San Francisco, and then it's a 4-month program that's very like mentor-driven and help the companies with early sales, intros to customers, and then help them with follow-on funding. And then I'm also a venture partner with a fund called the SaaStr Fund, which is a $90 million kind of seed Series A fund, also focused on SaaS B2B companies.
So we have talked about SaaS.
Yeah, sorry.
I've heard it 4 or 5 times now.
Okay.
140 characters or less. What is SaaS?
SaaS is selling software on a recurring revenue basis. So it's basically selling software as a service is what it stands for. But it forces companies to really focus on delivering a really good product and service versus selling software the traditional way, which is selling a huge piece of software up front and then just paying for maintenance over time. But so that's kind of the difference. Yeah.
Slightly
and
more than
delivering it
140.
over the cloud. Yeah.
Slightly more than 140.
Yeah,
Not a tweet answer, but
Yeah.
that's all right. What music are you?
Geez, I don't know. Classic rock.
Classic rock. Nice.
Yeah.
You two guys will get along.
Yeah.
All right, so already this morning I've had, I don't know, countless product demos. Hey, Derek, me too. I'm building an app, right? And they scroll through their app or whatever, right? And I think that's fantastic. Just a show of hands, how many people have ever thought of or are currently thinking about starting a company? That's why you're here, right? So the question to you guys would be, what advice would you have from the investment side to that population, right? They're about to go head deep into the swimming pool. What would you tell them from the investment side? Anybody who wants to take it?
So, if you come to a serious VC, so you need to have a period that shows some customer acquisition. I mean, the idea with the twinkle in the eye should really be financed by friends and family or whatever. I mean, usually we get a lot of calls unless I have a good history of customer acquisition, some idea what the revenue model is going to be, and some history about the people. We usually just, tell them, come next time when you have all those things.
Sage Carmen?
Yes, I'll answer this in two ways. So one is kind of what look for in an entrepreneur when it's early stage, maybe even pre-product, where you're kind of just going off the team and the idea. And I'll also answer more specifically to kind of the fintech industry, which is kind of the lens that I look at the world. So in terms of an entrepreneur, passion, kind of, do they really care about this? Would they do this? They weren't getting paid for it. And there's ways to look at that, like look at their life experiences. What have they done in the past? They willing to leave their job, all of that kind of stuff. Then it's kind of, can they make a decision without full set of information? So can you make a quick decision, almost think fast and slow at the same time? So the ability to actually move fast, because you have to move fast relative to your competitors and go to market if you're creating an app, for example. But then be able to think slow enough to make right strategic decision. I think it's hard for a lot of first-time entrepreneurs to do that, because sometimes you're thinking, how do you put your kind of right foot in front of your left? When you've done it a second time, that's helpful. And I think, to be honest, when I look at entrepreneurs, especially in fintech, and this gets to the fintech piece of it, having prior experience founding a company, building a successful company, I think is really helpful.
What's fintech?
So financial technology. So it's how technology is being applied to finance, whether that's direct to consumer, creating new spending apps like Exec, or robo-advisors like Wealthfront, Betterment, online lending platforms like Lending Club, or in the B2B world. It's creating technologies that generally software as a service, which sell to banks and financial institutions to make customer experience more efficient, improve front and back office processes, reduce costs and headcount, et cetera. But yeah, so in the fintech world, particularly when it's a B2B fintech company, where they're selling to banks, you're often selling to people with 20, 30 years experience in the industry, a large institution that has ton of stakeholders that they need to make sure they keep happy, probably a stock price to keep up, an analyst they'll have to answer to if something goes wrong. In fintech, when you're selling a technology or building a company for the enterprise, I think it's actually really important to have experience and expertise in the space. I mean, that's when I look at fintech companies that are B2B, I often look for, what's their prior background? Have they done something in the financial services world? They don't have to necessarily have started a startup, but have they worked in the industry? And I think that's super helpful. May not apply to all industries, but certainly in the industry that I live in, having the expertise and knowing where to go is so much of building a startup. It's knowing whether to turn right or left. So I think that's a critical piece of it.
Nice. Michael?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is, I'm obviously biased around this, but I think running an accelerator, I think it's super important, but surrounding yourself with people who can be mentors and advisors to you along the way, it's really, really hard starting a company. And so the more people you can have on your team can be really helpful. And then just from thinking about it, I talk to way too many founders who come to me with ideas or businesses, and they haven't spent a lot of time talking to customers. It's just like they think it's a really good idea, they think people will buy it. But the ones that I really like are the ones that are like, can basically like tell me what the future looks like. They can tell me, how the market's going to evolve, why they're going to win deals over the legacy incumbents in the space. They can tell me like why they're going to win deals over the new other startups in the space. And so they've hustled to like do the homework. They've talked to 50 customers. They like truly deeply understand the market they're going after and how they think it's going to evolve over the next 5 years. So I look for that. And then the second piece I look for is just if you're very succinct in explaining that vision and you're passionate about it, usually you can be really good at recruiting people. And so that's the other thing I look for is like, do I think this founder is going to be good at recruiting other people? And a lot of that is just like confidence and passion and understanding of the market and just like having command of what you're doing. So I think that's a key thing as an early founder.
One thing I'd like to add, about 2 years I was asked the same question. We're partners in the largest accelerator in Tel Aviv called The Time. And so I was speaking to all the entrepreneurs at the accelerator, and they asked me the same questions. And one of the things I said to them, if you can have somebody who is fully employed in an amazing industry similar to yours, leaving that job to come to you, that's a good indication. So you have somebody who is totally unbiased, who's willing to give up $100,000, $200,000 job, and he's coming to work for you. And oddly enough, looking back, out of the 16 companies I talked to, the 3 that are most successful had done that.
Yeah, that's a really unique indicator. I like that a lot.
The other piece of that too is
I might be biased.
often, on that point, often founders are not necessarily going to know everything. They might be passionate about it. They might know the industry, but they're not going to be able to know everything or do everything. So I think another quality for founders that it's hard to test sometimes, but you look for is a founder willing to hire somebody who's smarter than them to do a specific thing? Because oftentimes you have to scale and you get leverage from hiring better people than you. And you can continue to run the team, have the vision, and there's no harm in bringing on people who can help you get there. And that's often done by hiring smarter.
I'll add another very nuanced thing, and I don't have the data to prove this yet, so it's completely anecdotal. But I feel like there's a very high correlation between founders who are like quick to respond to things and how well they end up doing.
Like email?
Yeah, like anything, email, phone
Yeah.
calls. Like I just think those are the types of people who just like get stuff done, and they're like thinking about their business 24/7. And the ones who take like days to respond to an investor, I'm just like, either they don't care enough about that investor, and then maybe it's just not the right fit, or like something else is going on. Like I worry, do they take that long to respond to customers, whatever it is. But it's a very like nuanced thing, and I'm still trying to figure out what the correlation is or why that happens. But I've seen it across a lot of different companies.
No, I like that too. One anecdote from Exec, obviously we're pre-product and things like that. One of my favorites is, so a lot of people don't know, but Eli Crane heads up operations at Exec. He's my right-hand man when it comes to like running the company and getting investors and things like that. We had an investor respond to Eli saying, I just heard about Exec 3 times in 30 minutes because you emailed our entire team, like individually emailing the team. And so we might be outsmarted, we might be beat to market, but we're not going to be out-hustled. So it's fantastic. Fantastic story. So no reason for clapping. We're not even launched yet, guys. Come on. So along those lines, like I like the 2 years ago to date. Let's keep that thread going. We have more years of experience combined, right here, these 3 seats, than maybe some of these people have been alive, right? So talk how you've seen the industry change, whether it's fintech, whether it's investing in general. How are companies trending now? Like, what do you see has been the trend, and where do you see investing and technology going?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab at this initially. So one of the things I've seen is when I moved out to Silicon Valley in 2008, and I feel like even then, a lot of the bigger institutional funds would write checks early on. Like seed actually meant like pre-product in a lot of cases, pre-revenue, pre-customers. And I've seen a pretty big shift in a lot of the like institutional funds moving up a little bit. Like they want to see some customers, they want to see some traction. And so I think then that opens up this new like pre-seed or the new seed of like friends and family money and other sources of capital. And that's been kind of coupled with technology has gotten more mainstream. People are realizing the potential that technology has to kind of change the world, change a lot of industries. And so I think that is happening, and so more and more money is flowing into that earlier stage, which I think is a good thing. But it goes back to your point earlier of like when it's just an idea and a team, like try to find initial funding from your network. Going to VCs, very early on when it's just an idea can often be a waste of time, in my opinion.
I agree. So I think that the change over the last several years has been that A used to be easier than it is today. A is very difficult today. So seed is easy and B is easy. A is probably the most challenging thing out of all the rounds. And so HDS Capital, for example, invests in a seed plus or A minus. In other words, if a company has got customers, has got a product, got team, got everything, got revenues, but if we gave him $2 million or $1.5 million, we will give him another year or another 15 months of runway where the A, instead of being valued at 15 or 20, be valued at 25 or 30. That's really a good thing. So I would urge everybody to kind of like think of that as that kind of interim bridge between seed and A in order to get a good value for the true A. And I think that works.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the A rounds now, you actually need to show traction metrics for an institutional VC to say, yeah, I'm willing to fund this. I think it's interesting though too, because you've seen explosion of micro VCs. I think there's like hundreds of micro VCs out there now. Ton of new ones being formed, and that micro VC is a fund under $100 million, which I guess you guys would technically be considered a micro VC, but you guys are on the higher end of that scale. But a lot of micro VCs are being funded, which means more capital flooding into early stage, and that meant seed valuations have also gone up in the last few years too, to the order of kind of like $1.5–2 million pre-money valuation, which means that even if you do want to go the institutional route and get seed investors who are VCs, you want to make sure you have some level of traction, most likely, because they're taking still a significant amount of risk, but you're certainly not going to be where the institutional guys are, which is what the seed investors hope next round. Then those guys come in higher valuation. I think also what you've seen in the last few years too, specifically in fintech, is in 2012 when fintech was kind of just starting to get quote unquote hot, $3 billion of venture capital had been invested into fintech. Now, fast forward to 2017, $16 billion has been invested into fintech, venture capital money. And about a fourth of that has actually been from corporate VC participation. So in all the fintech funding rounds, about a fourth of that has come from from corporate VCs, corporates of all nature who are participating, and it's strategic to their business. And I think that's an interesting, if any of you are fintech entrepreneurs, that's an interesting thing to think about, particularly if you're building a B2B financial technology business, because sometimes you can get your investors to be your customers as well, or your customers to be your investors as well, and that can create value. There's obviously some bells and whistles that come with it sometimes.
So we have a fund at the time, that Banca Pauline fund, that basically sets aside money to invest at the early stage company, and they basically give them access, especially in security, in the security space. They basically, okay, build something and let it run on my space. Yeah. And they give them data, they give them opportunity, they give them the sandbox to be able to do what they need to do. And then later on, they take some warrants and opportunities against that if they really move forward. So to your point, it's really important to have a partner in fintech, a reputable partner to basically say, I worked with this bank or with this institution and it worked.
That's great. Show of hands really quick. How many people out there, out of those who want to be in tech one day, would like to work in financial technology? Like, it's just interesting to you. You like the financial sector. Show of hands, how many people want to or currently do? That's pretty interesting. I want to control everything, someone said. So that's pretty interesting. related, and Jaime, I'm going to let you sit out this question because we have your answer. For the other two, if you had to quit investing in venture capital right now and start a company, what sector would it be in? I'm not going to ask for your idea because one of these people will take it. But how many, what sector would you enter into right now? What do you think is going to be hot over the next, let's call it 5 years?
Can I answer?
Yeah, you can answer. I thought you'd already answered your question with kid
Health.
Health. Okay.
I think health technology is probably the most lucrative space that is out there today. Everything health, automating health, managing health, reducing cost in health, anything related to health, in my view, is as equally important as fintech.
Fantastic. You guys?
He actually stole my answer because I was literally just talking to my wife on the car ride over here about how ridiculous health insurance is.
Yeah.
And how antiquated of a kind of process and system the whole health system is. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to automate a lot over.
No, that's great. For those who are interested in insurance, which is kind of like, that sounds ridiculous to say, right? Like, how many people are interested in insurance tech? But for those who are interested, there's a fantastic article online about like the rise of insurance. I actually think it was from the Business Insider. I don't know where Frank is now, but yeah, there you go. You're welcome for that plug. So go read about insurance tech. It's the most riveting thing you'll read in your life. And by the way, finance is taken. Exec has won the space. It's over. Michael.
Any company that can get funded by an initial coin offering using a tokenized crypto asset. So talk to the guy who sat in my seat before in the last panel.
So all I heard right now was blah, 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 Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah.
I'm joking. I'm saying it in tongue in cheek. But there's this whole craze of what are called initial coin offerings where companies are actually raising money with tokenized assets of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever token their protocol sits on top of. The investors actually don't get any governance in the company. There's no equity that the startups have to give up. So it seems like a pretty good deal for the startups. We'll see how long it lasts because it's the SEC still deciding whether or not it's security or not. But yeah, I mean, this week you saw a $200 million ICO raise from a company that has yet to build a product, a company called Filecoin. Well backed, good investors, but has yet to build a product. So I say that tongue in cheek, but no, I actually do think blockchain, and that could be applied to whether it's healthcare, financial services. It's really interesting because I think what you're seeing is. So the internet happened in the mid-'90s, and the infrastructure had to be built. So I would actually look to build. I would look at the different markets that blockchain is changing and disrupting, and try to think through how can you build the infrastructure for that to some extent.
Just as the internet was like infrastructure in the late 90s, you think that blockchain, cryptocurrencies, et cetera, is infrastructure for maybe a decade, 15 years from now?
I think it's the infrastructure, or the internet of money.
Okay.
So it's anything can become a tokenized asset. You're seeing a lot of people say, okay, traditional assets like real estate, equity securities, private equity, you could actually tokenize an asset. So use like Bitcoin or Ethereum, and people could invest in that tokenized asset. And then there's an underlying, which is the traditional asset, and they'd get quote unquote liquidity. Now, you still have to decide whether or not you want to do something like that. As an investor, there's still risks. You're investing in this token that has a value, and that could be very volatile. I mean, Bitcoin went up almost $800, $900 in the last week, but it's now at $4,000.
So what you're saying is that I can click a button on like Coinbase and buy Casson Beach?
Eventually, maybe there's a way to do that. And
Jack, I'm coming for you. Where are you at?
And the nice thing is you might still be able to retain some sort of ownership in it. So you're not just selling it to Derek, even though he'd probably be a great owner.
Thanks. All right, so one last question, and then we're going to let Jack give some words while we transition into our final session, keynote. So this is going to be the hardest question. What is the most controversial thing you believe about investing in technology right now that 90, 80%, some high percentage of investors would disagree with you on?
Most investors are reading everybody's playbook. They're basically all on the same page.
That that there might be controversial. Every investor's like, no, 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 we're special. Like, no, you're reading everyone else's playbook.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
I think in general, there's a lot of people who think like there's too many SaaS companies out there, and like cloud has been done, and like the next wave is, is going to be harder and harder to invest in, and I just think there's still so much opportunity in like leveraging AI to automate even the last generation of cloud and SaaS companies that. I don't know. I'm obviously biased, but I think there's a ton of opportunity still in SaaS, and I think there's a lot of people who think it's too crowded of a space.
It's great.
This will be specific to fintech, and I'm probably not the only one who thinks this, but I'm probably in the minority, which is that I actually don't. I think a lot of the next wave of fintech companies that get created will not necessarily be disruptors and be multi-billion-dollar companies, but they'll be ones that get acquired by existing institutions. $100, $200 million, $300 million exits because they provide so much value. And the existing institutions, while they may not have the same brand value to millennials or others, and they may have very low NPS scores, they are certainly not blind to what's going on in financial technology. So I think it'll be much harder to create a truly disruptive fintech company, because then I think companies like Amazon, like why not Amazon the bank? I mean, they know exactly what you buy, when you buy it, where you buy it, what your history is, where you live. They can pretty much do anything, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like them got into banking. So rather than try to build a completely new bank or finance app, with the exception of exec, think through how will existing institutions interact in this environment.
That's a great setup for the keynote. So you guys stick around. We're going to have some words from Mr. Casson, and then we'll change around for the keynote. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Derek. This is unplanned few comments from myself. I'm not part of a panel. I'm not a venture capitalist. I'm a businessman. I have to admit, I have no idea what these people are talking about in the last hour and a half. But my most important message is I want to bring it down to human terms. I was once a young, energetic, ambitious young man. It's a little scary as you're looking ahead and starting. Let me see again all the people that hope to start some kind of a business, whether it's technology or otherwise, at this time. Beautiful. I wish you all the best of luck. And even the people that are now working for companies, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I tell my 3 sons from day one, and it's embedded in their brain. There's a few very important things. Don't get intimidated where you think to yourself, who am I? Where am I going to start? I look at this company, that company. What am I going to bring to the market? How am I going to succeed? Don't be afraid about that. If you have a good idea, a good product, a good model, go with it. Have confidence in yourself. Have faith in Hashem. Be persistent. Of course, be smart. Have your eyes and ears open. Be agile to change if you see things along the way that you have to change. But have faith. And as long as you could come home every single day and say, and look yourself in the mirror and say, I was honest today in my work, I dealt honestly, and I did the best I could today. If you could say that more days than less, or every day, you will succeed. You will not know where your road will take you, and you'll be amazed as years go on, and you'll say, how did I get here when I started there? It's proven, each one on their own level, each one on their own beracha from God. And don't be afraid, be strong, be confident, and the community is in back of you. Exceed, Propel Network, Bikur Cholim, job sites, the community is with you. We have organizations and we have businessmen, as we know it, that are ready to help you, advise you,
invest with you morally, physically, and financially. So God bless all of you. May you all attend all your dreams, and may Hashem bless you with everything great. Amen.
All right, we're going to have a keynote now called WTF, Why Tackle Finance?
It's all yours.
Appreciate that. All right, so I know that again, we don't want to be in the heat and things like that. It's cool. It's fine. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial world. I know that is kind of distant to most people, right? Like we don't necessarily understand how it works. We don't necessarily understand how tech applies. And we've heard this exec thing maybe for months now. We have no idea what it's doing either, right? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about me before we jump in. So as you can tell, this is going to be like fairly fireside chat-y at the end. There's going to be questions about what I'm talking about anything else. I'm going to try to do as good of a job as possible to explaining like exactly what's happening here, or exactly what's happening. You're welcome for that joke. It's going to be full of them. So a little bit about me, CEO of Exec. Before that, I worked at a financial tech company called Adipar. Before that, I led a team of developers responsible for LinkedIn's flagship enterprise product. We did about $2 billion in revenue a year. Left LinkedIn for Adipar, raised $140 million Series D to Adipar, and then left Adipar to join the guys and girls at Exec. And before that, basically I ran restaurants and coffee houses. So that was cool. And I graduated, I don't come from tech. I don't have a computer science background, self-taught. Before that, I graduated from East Carolina University, which was more known for professional football and beer drinking than it was for SAT scores and, Ivy League degrees. So that's my background. You hear a little bit of Southern in my voice. I'm a good old boy from the South that found his way to Silicon Valley and then New York. So that's where we are. I studied political science and philosophy, which is basically the study of how people and things think, right? Which is governments, institutions, people, etc. And so that's what I want to talk about, right? I don't want to talk about like SaaS and fintech and things like that. I want to put things into perspective as to how you and I think, as well as how financial institutions and tech companies think, right? So let's start with banks. How do banks think? Here's how a bank works, right? A bank works by you saying, I need somewhere to put my money that is not my mattress. Okay? You don't want to stick the money in your house. Some people still do, and that's fine. But you put your money into a bank expecting that money to be there when you go back and get it, right? It's a safety deposit box, essentially.
Derek, I'm going to stop you again.
Where are we at?
I need silence, folks. Folks, give Derek your attention, please. 3 minutes. He's going to speak. Give him his chance and quiet down for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So you put your money into a bank and it sits there. You trust that bank to have your money when you go back and get it. Okay? Now, meanwhile, that bank says, oh, we've got all this money. What can we do with it? Right? So that bank takes the money of all of us. So say we put together the Bank of Casson Beach, right? And I say, or Mr. Casson, Jack says, everyone give me your money. We all give him his money. This may or may not be a great idea. We all give him his money, and then he starts loaning it out to collect interest back, make money, and then when you need money to go pay your bills or whatever, you go to the Bank of Casson Beach and you withdraw your money, right? Banks work on trust. That you trust when you walk up to an ATM or you walk into a branch or you walk into the bank, that you collect the money that you've deposited there. Everybody follow so far? Yep. Now what happens when there is what's called a run on the bank? This happened in 2007. What happens is so many people think, okay, I can no longer trust my bank to have my money. If everyone were to think that, we all go to the bank and say, give me my money back, right? And the bank's like, this ain't Walmart. You don't have a money back guarantee, right? And then what has happened? They've loaned this money out, right? So do they actually have your money? No. It's gone somewhere, right? Now, I want to be very clear here. This is not a bad thing, right? Well, runs on banks are. But loaning money out is not a bad thing, right? If you want to start a business, if you want to buy a house, do all of these things, if you want to go to college sometimes, right? Financial institutions and banks exist to facilitate the movement of that capital, of that money, in order to create economic activity, to create wealth, right? And this is a very, very good thing for society. This is why banks exist. Banks are not evil institutions, right? You look at IDB Bank, their motto is written right on the banner. It's personal, right? That's great. That's fantastic. You won't have a run on IDB, guarantee, right there. Right? So when banks are really, really good for society. They're enabling all of this economic wealth, right? Now, what happens here is banks start thinking about assets, budgets, balances, liabilities, debt, because they have to make sure that when Elijah goes to his bank and says, hey, I need my $10K or whatever, or $10 that I deposited, the bank has it. And so they have to dedicate a massive amount of people and paper to making sure that they have money when it's in the bank. Does that make sense? There are literally thousands upon thousands of people in Weehawken or Hoboken or Utah or wherever that are dedicated to making sure that our money is in the bank when we go to the bank and get it. Okay? Do we follow? Now, what happened with the internet revolution in 2012, as Michael Sidgmore said earlier, the fintech revolution began and said, hey, these 3,000 people could be dedicating their lives to something even greater, even more important than monitoring Excel spreadsheets. Follow? And so what happened was the fintech revolution, financial technology, exploded. And all it did was to enable banks to more efficiently and effectively do the work that banks do. Again, banks are thinking about money, assets, liabilities, loans, borrowing, debt, budgets, etc., right? And so when you think and look at the finance technology that came about from these banks, that's exactly what they're thinking about, right? So when you open Mint.com, which was started, pre-financial revolution, when you open a Mint.com, which was, in response to Intuit, which is itself a financial technology firm, they look like, hey, Drone, they look like banks do. They think like banks do. It's a spreadsheet with makeup on it. Do we follow? They're thinking about assets and loans and budgets. And so the way that a bank manages that is with an Excel spreadsheet, right? And the way that financial technology manages that is with something that looks like a spreadsheet but is tech-enabled, right? It's the next iteration. Do we follow? All right. So banks think about money. They think about assets, balances, loans, debt, liabilities, etc. Financial technology, as began in, let's call it the 2000s, began thinking about money in that same exact way. And so fintech exploded with things like wealth management. Get used to it, by the way. That's the future, right? We're all going to be spied on. It's great. So when you are looking at financial technology, there are massive sectors and industries, right, dedicated to wealth management, to regulatory and compliance, right, to liability management, to the facilitation of like loans and debt transactions, right? There are entire industries dedicated to this stuff, okay? This came about because banks who were thinking about money and assets and loans and liabilities decided to get more efficient, more effective at creating economic activity and wealth. Does this make sense? Yeah? I know it's a history lesson. I'm Professor Brown, whatever, right? I get it. Doc Brown, it's a great drink. Doc Brown. It's like Dr. Pepper. It's off-brand, but whatever. So what happened next was, right, banks started to move into personal finance, right? Mint.com that I kind of named earlier. There are others out there, right? My phone is full of them. If you want to see some of them, come by, right? Personal finance managers, Personal Capital is one, Level Money was another that just got shut down last week. These apps have erupted on the tail end of banks investing in technology. Now, here's the problem, right? It's a good thing that more technology is trying to enable personal finance, but here's the problem. The problem is that these are apps and technologies that are dedicated to serving you and you and you as people, but they're coming from institutions in an ecosystem that thinks like what? Banks. And now, on top of that, where do most investors come from? No offense to our panel earlier. Most investors also come from banks. So now you have people who are thinking like banks, who grew up in a banking ecosystem, dedicating their capital to building apps that come out of the banking ecosystem, where everyone is thinking like a bank, serving the individual, serving you and you and you and you. Now, show of hands, who here thinks like a bank? Like 5 people maybe. And you guys and girls likely have spreadsheets and you budget really rigorously and things like that. And that's a good thing. You're super responsible. I'm not, whatever, right? And that's great. There is a subset of the population that thinks like banks. The vast majority of people do not think like that. We don't think like assets and liabilities and budgets and debt instruments and loans and balance sheets. That's not how we think. The vast majority of society does not see money as the end. It sees money as the means to an end. That's a really, really important point. That money is not the end goal. That once we have our balance sheet balanced or the liabilities and assets matched, and like we know that if someone comes and collects, whether it's a bill or whatever, that we have enough money in the bank, right? That's not what we're thinking about primarily. We're thinking, do I have enough money for this Lyft ride home tonight? Can I afford this dope meal with my friends? Can I go out for cocktails? Can I afford education for my children? Can I buy a house? Can I buy a beach? Right? We are ultimately spending our capital for the purpose of obtaining a quality of life, having experiences, and making our way to a better us. And money is simply the middleman between where we are and where we want to be. Does that make sense? Now, how many of you think like that? Right? This is why we're building Exec. We're building Exec for people who think about money like people. There are apps out there that think about money like Exec or like banks, right? And that's fine. That's great. Go them. We think about money like people as a means to an end. So how many of you, another show of hands, have your finance app in like one folder, right? A banking app, mint.com, whatever. You also have a lifestyle app like Yelp or Foursquare or OpenTable or Resy, something restaurant or experience related, StubHub for tickets or whatever. How many of you have 2 different apps, right? We literally just said that the whole reason we think about money is to obtain a lifestyle. It's one thing. Why do we have 2 different apps? It's ridiculous, right? Tech has segregated those 2 things where you and I as people don't. We don't segregate those things. They're one and the same. We use our money in order to obtain a lifestyle, right? No matter how old or young you are, right? It's just the lifestyles change, right? The co-founders at Exec are looking for their significant other, right? Ladies, they're single. Shout out, right? I have mine. Where, Miranda? Hey. I have 3 kids. Our quality of life and what our lifestyle looks like is different. But that doesn't mean that we're not using our money to that end, right? And so what Exec does is it ties you to the lifestyle that you want to live. How? By aggregating where you're putting your money. You literally put your money where your mouth is. And then we show you things like how much are you spending, not based on category, right? Not based on, food, because you look at, I spent $600 on food. I'm a really responsible person because I spent all of that money at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or whatever, right? Whereas in reality, you're spending $400 on brunch because you love Saturday mornings, right? Whatever it is. So if you're just looking at category, you don't get the full picture. We are giving you what is your average transaction, your total transaction, how many times are you going to the individual merchants who are ultimately delivering the experiences that you all know and love, right? So how many of you love Kith? right? It's a brand, it's a product, right? And how many of you have been asked, okay, so why do you spend X amount of money at Kith when you could just go to Gap, right? Or Banana Republic or TJ Maxx for, whatever, right? Why do you spend that much money? And we give some like dumb answer that's totally made up. Oh, it's about the quality of no. It's about the brand, the experience. You're buying an experience from your merchants. The reason that we prefer one restaurant over another is the experience. Sure, it's food and it's good, right? But if you have a bad experience, you're not going back. We're buying experiences from merchants, but our finance apps are not merchant-centric, okay? So we focus on the merchants. We give you the finances, but we also know that our financial lives are not lived in isolation. We're going out with friends. We're enjoying these experiences, these places with other people. Right? Now, obviously, we don't want our finances shared, right? We don't want our friends to know exactly how much money we have and how much money we did spend at Kith, because that would be ridiculous, right? But it's still a social aspect. So what Exec does is on a merchant profile, on the merchant, by showing you the financial information that you have with that merchant, we also enable you to see, are your friends going there? Are they enjoying it? Are they having a good time? Did they have a bad time last time? Without any financial information being leaked. It's completely secure. This is super, super important, and we believe that it's going to revolutionize the way we think about our money, because, in fact, it's not revolutionizing the way we think about money. It's finally meeting what we already have in mind. Does this make sense? Yeah. Got it. All right? So this is what Exec is doing. That finally there is technology that has been brought to reality that does not think about money the way that banks do. We think about the money the way that you do, the way that people do, right? Finally. Money, lifestyle, right? So our saying that we love internally is that we want you to have the lifestyle you want with the budget you have. And then finally, there's an app that will help you do that. That's exactly what we're up to. If you find an Exec team member and want to see it in action, we've got it on our phones. We'd love to show you. I will be the first to be transparent here. I clicked on the app for the first time and saw that over the last 18 months, I've spent $7K at Amazon, and it blew my mind. But I ain't ashamed about it, whatever. So it's going to be fascinating for all of us to kind of see where we're spending, not just, oh, I spend this much money on coffee or retail or whatever, but actually where we're putting our money and how that will change our habits, right? All right, so I'm Derek. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah.
So, do you have something to say? So just before we go, So on the subject of Exceed, before we all sign off, I know Isaac's going to want to close. I just want to remind everybody how we're here for you and what we're here to do. So a lot of you here that are starting businesses or that are in businesses or are already in business, we're here to support you. We have coaching groups where we could give you 2 mentors. Today, one of the gentlemen spoke about how important it is to have a mentor. So many people start businesses and have no one to talk to. So we're here for you. We'll put people together with you for whatever business you're in, so we could support and coach you through whatever it is or whatever opportunities you have. Besides the coaching programs, we also have a co-working space at 404 Fifth Avenue. So if anyone needs space, we actually give you coaching along with co-working space. So again, tomorrow is the women's event. All the women should be there. It's inspirational. It's going to be really a fantastic format. There's going to be a great panel. And again, the CEO of Soul Cycle will speak. So I'm going to be departing, so I want to thank you all for coming. And I think this was a great event today. And again, thank you to Joyce and Jack Casson. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.